Hello and welcome to this webinar on best practices using Microsoft Teams with Wilberforce College. So I'm just going to start off by introducing the team today. So we've got myself, the Director and Consultant at Cloud Design Box. We've got Darren Hemming, our Operations Manager, Lloyd Tooton, a Trainer and Consultant, and our guest today, Jonathan Butler, the Assistant Principal at Wilberforce College. So hello everyone, thanks for joining.
Tony.
Hi everyone. So before we get started, I'm just going to tell you a bit about ourselves and Cloud Design Box and what we do with schools. A quick word from our partner Salamander Soft, and then we'll get straight into having a chat with Jonathan about those best practices. So a bit about ourselves. We're a team of education Teams experts, and we support over 220 schools in the UK and abroad. Now, some of the features that we provide to schools, we help schools create a branded intranet site. So that's an area where you can publish resources to large groups of people in the organisation. We also try our best to help save teachers time. So we create things like centralised resource areas so that teachers only have to upload the resources in a central location and they can use it within all of their class teams every single academic year. And we also try and help heads of departments keep track of the quality of resources by just having one version of the truth. You can see from the screen here that there's lots of other features that we do. One in particular that I'll just pick out, and something that's I guess relevant today, is the user adoption aspect. So we do try and help schools get good user adoption across the entire school. So not just the tech savvy teachers, but actually bring everybody on that journey with you, which is, a difficult process for most schools. So we help schools by providing training, CPD self-service portals, and just keep constantly checking up on that with you to make sure that you get that good user adoption across the entire school. So a quick word about our partner that we're doing this in partnership with, Salamander Soft. So Salamander automate the creation of user accounts from your MIS data. They can also automate Google Classroom, School Data Sync, and lots of other things that you can see listed there. And if you're interested in their services, then their contact details are available on the screen. So I'm going to pass you over to Jonathan Butler, who's going to have a quick chat with you initially about the EdTech Demonstrator program that Wilberforce Sixth Form College are running. So hello, Jonathan.
Hi everyone. Yeah. So thanks for inviting me in on this this webinar then, Tony. So as you can see on the screen, our college, we've been an EdTech demonstrator now since June of 2020, so pretty much midway through the first lockdown. The reason partly that we were awarded the demonstrator was basically that we had a bit of a head start with linking our Teams platform with SharePoint, because one of the issues we were finding with Teams is that if you don't have a back-end system for sharing files, it does become a little bit messy, and it's also not sustainable year on year. So if you want to move fully into using Teams, you do really need to think about file sharing as a priority and how you can make sure that from year on year, when you are renewing class teams, how you can actually make that beneficial and use possibly a SharePoint backend like what Cloud Design Box will build for you to make sure it's really efficient. So as a demonstrator, if anyone wants to get in contact, feel free. I'm sure we'll share contact details somehow at the end of this, but you can apply through the LGFL website to get help and assistance from an EdTech demonstrator. There is an option to choose Wilberforce on there if you feel you want to ask us questions, that's fine. One thing I will also say is, as a result of just one second. As a result of us being an EdTech demonstrator and also using Cloud Design Box, we've seen a massive improvement in our CPD from our staff. So myself, after having the training which Lloyd, who's in on the call, provided, it inspired me to definitely sort of look more at how we can use SharePoint and Teams and things like that. And there's loads and loads of official Microsoft training that you can supplement the training that Cloud Design Box offer. And if you look at that graph there, what we saw is a massive engagement from our staff. So after the training that Cloud Design Box offered, we saw a really big improvement in the numbers of staff, like just seeking out CPD for themselves. So that blue arrow, it covers about 80% of our teaching staff that have actually sought improved training from the Microsoft Educator Centre. And as a result of that, we've just been awarded the first sixth form in the country to be showcase college status. So it sort of snowballed really after we got involved with Cloud Design Box. So hopefully that's sufficient from myself. I'll pass back over to you, Tony. If there are any questions, people can ask later on in the webinar.
Great, thanks for that, Jonathan. And yeah, we'll bring you back in with some questions about best practices a bit later on. I think Lloyd has a quick video to show people. I think we'll just show a few minutes of it about Wilberforce College and how they've implemented Teams.
It's more of a way of sharing ideas and sharing resources in a really kind of nice package.
It's a communication tool, really.
It's really interactive.
Like, I didn't think I'd be able to use it, but I can. It's quite easy.
It's actually enabled us to be really reactive in terms of student needs.
Yeah, you can get everything. You can even get the PowerPoints that we're doing during the lesson.
For example, just a couple of days ago, I texted my teacher, Baron, to ask a question about a certain topic, and he replied immediately.
Initially, our plan was to make our digital landscape a lot more accessible. So what we were finding was that the students that we currently work with, they don't necessarily have access to loads of digital devices at home. So that was actually impacting on their ability to carry out independent work. We realised that these students actually could do with a single platform that would actually enable them to access all of their digital content via one app. So we actually went with Microsoft Teams because it actually worked on everyone's phone. They didn't need an extra device.
Great, thanks. And I think the full video is on YouTube if you did want to find out more about that. So I'll now pass you over to Darren and Lloyd, who are going to take you through some of the best practices using Microsoft Teams.
Thanks, Tony. So looking at the best practice, well, what do we mean? We mean the things that we cover in our training that give you the optimum experience. So everything's going to save teacher time, keep your students safe and engaged. These are the things that we talk about in our training, but of course they echo what you're going to see in the education programs from Microsoft as well as Jonathan spoke about. They all kind of dovetail together. So the main benefits for teachers are about centralizing resources, as Jonathan said, rather than just every teacher, every educator having their own set of resources that they carry around with them each year. If you share the resources between educators, between teachers, then you'll save teacher time because everyone's doing a little bit less work. It also lets you drive up quality because, of course, the heads of department can then look at all those resources and have confidence that the very best resources are being used for teaching and learning. The other thing that's going to raise standards is adding some robustness to your CPD. So you can do that with things like Staff Notebook. Because of some of the teams that we create, you might have, for example, a notebook where the head of department can see an overview of all the sections that every member of staff has in their department. And then those members of staff can work on their own sections quietly and securely. But of course, that head of department has the ability to see all that work and collaborate with those teachers in that area. In terms of working with students and managing their posts and conversations inside the teams, if you follow the best practice that we talk about in our training, then you learn about things like muting students, you learn about setting up the policies that need to be set up to keep students safe. So, for example, making sure that a student can't say something inappropriate in one of their messages and then just delete it or edit it, like they might do in Snapchat. There are ways of switching that off. And the other aspect of safeguarding is in the Teams meetings, of course, because by following the best practice that we talk about when you set up Teams meetings, you can make sure that all students go into the lobby. That's a really good way of making sure you're not getting students kind of from other schools trying to get into those classes because somebody sent them a link. It's just an extra step that adds some safety to those meetings. Jonathan, have you found that any of these things have been useful for you? I know you mentioned the resources already.
Yeah, so one of the things that you set up for us was sort of slightly different teams, and these were called collaboration spaces. So we managed to get pretty much every single team in our college that now has a collaboration space, and they can interact with that either in SharePoint or in Teams. So if they, say, for example, shared a file via the Teams interface, it would also appear in the SharePoint site, which is really useful when they, because what we're finding now is staff are signposting a bit of time each month to then look at the SharePoint site and make sure it's organised so that next year they can always find those PowerPoints and stuff, year on year, that you always lose, but you need to re-churn out for students or for your sort of role. So yeah, the collaboration spaces have been really useful that we found that are created in Teams and then mirror the SharePoint.
Interesting. Yeah, I suppose with Teams, the temptation is just to chuck everything up into the posts. Oh, I'll write a post about it. I'll attach a document to the post, which is fine. It gets it up quickly. But then what do you do next year? How do you find those documents if they're just kind of hanging around in the posts? Whereas if you organize things properly in the Files tab, and you can use folders and subfolders, that's fine. Or even better, if you hop across to the SharePoint view, that really allows you to organize your content and search for it. So it's really good to hear that. Lloyd, can we move on to the student best practice benefits? Lovely, thank you. So again, this is the other side of the coin, really. So we talked about the teacher benefits. This then enables students to have these particular benefits as well. So just a very easy way for teachers to come in and make announcements to their students in the context of a single class team. So, one teacher and 30 students. Of course, students can pick that up then on their mobile devices using the Teams app. They can get alerts on those new announcements. The conversations that students have, we talked about this already, because everything is in a safe walled garden. It's not like some of the other social media systems out there where kind of anybody can join it and anybody can say anything. Within this space, that it's only the students in that class that can say anything within the posts, within the messaging, and that teachers can see that. That if something is said, it can't be unsaid, it can't be changed. And once students understand the rules, once they understand that if they say something mean or inappropriate, they will be called up on it, quite quickly they stop doing those things. Jonathan, have you kind of struggled with that at all, getting students to use these systems sensibly? Have there been things you can do to mitigate that?
Not while we were face to face. It was really easy because we could very clearly go over and look over someone's shoulder if one of the things we sometimes find is they'll click on a link, because often they're using their phones, and if they click on it and then maybe press the screen, it opens up another hyperlink. So what we in face to face, it's really easy, and on their phones, it's easier to sort of show them. But when they're at home, we don't find an issue because they're most of the time accessing the lessons on a laptop device from home, so they get the full screen. They get the what we're finding now is students are actually navigating the files and the folders a lot more. So teachers are not just sending them links to the individual PowerPoint, which you can see from the video, that's where we started, but now we're just saying, well, just go to the SharePoint files tab and open this folder, and all the resources are in there, because that enables students to then see what else is available that you might not use in the lesson.
Oh, that's really great news, because this is a conversation that we end up having quite a lot, is don't necessarily spoon feed the students by sending them a link to a particular document, but rather arm them with the ability to go search for a document using keywords that just in the title of the document or the body of the document. And quite often students will then search for a keyword that will take them to the folder that contains other resources that are related to the main resource. And of course that helps you do things like differentiation, because now you've got the ability for students to choose whether they want to do this activity or that activity, read this document that's been made available or that document. And I guess with a bit of support, you can start to cultivate independent learners.
Jonathan, in terms of safeguarding and well-being and getting the balance right, do you let students chat with other students inside teams, and if so, how do you sort of mitigate the risks?
So we started off where it was fully open. Students could set up their own, in the chat option, they could add so many students and they could have their own sort of specific group. We stopped that. There was an incident where some students were on there and they were talking about a specific teacher. I'll not go into the details, but this specific teacher actually had COVID. So they were off and the students were basically chatting about it, and one of the teachers found out, and then there was a big overreaction and it was like, right, shut this down. I think we've now reopened it because unfortunately students do have Snapchat, they have WhatsApp, they have Facebook. They're going to talk about things on social media. So we've reopened it because we actually find it's actually safer for students to be within the same app. And the way we look at it is, if a student misbehaves in person, well, then you're going to deal with it in person. You're not going to then remove them from every lesson, are you? So we have opened it up so students can chat, but we make sure that we talk about expectations and as well sort of social media presence, because we've got to train them with these digital skills so that if they go for a job, their social media history isn't trawled and they don't get the job because it's unsatisfactory. So yeah, I think it's a good point to make, that it's important to let them chat for well-being, but make sure that you clearly explain the benefits and also the expectations as it.
I guess there are policies that can be set as well, Jonathan. So say, for example, you had a particular small group of students who'd been a bit inappropriate in their use of the chat. You could have a group that you add those to, and they lose their chat rights, until they've shown that they can be trusted again, and then you let them back in.
Yeah, I think that's where we will head to now, that we, rather than jumping the gun. I think that's the big thing. It's don't sort of overreact. Like take a bit of time and realize, is this actually a really big problem? Get people to look at the evidence before, because sometimes with this, people will do a knee jerk. But actually, if you take your time, speak to your IT, sort the policies out, remove the rights for those students, but have a chat with them and then return the rights once after they've had a bit of a timeout. Because I do think it's important to be able to reconcile and show that actually you have improved. So now you get your privileges back. Yeah,
it's almost thinking in terms of, well, what would I normally do in a classroom? What's my craft of the classroom for this? Yeah. And if you have a student who's not behaving as they should be, well, you have a quiet word. There might be some sanctions. That might mean that they don't get participate in exactly the same way for a little while, but then you bring them back in, and that's the important thing. You don't leave students out in the cold forever. You help to fix their problem, if you like, to help them understand why what they did was wrong, and then that cycles into them being better, more productive members of the school and society generally.
And I guess they could do this in the classroom anyway, just by talking to people. So it's only really what they could actually do in the classroom. But I guess the worry is that it's unmonitored, and things can happen, such as bullying and things like that in the background that people might not be aware of.
Can I just add a quick sort of one thing that we talk to every student about when they are in person, because they will be on their phones if they're in a class. We get them to, on an iPhone, for example, double tap the home screen, swipe every app away that's not Teams. And then if they want to chat with the student that's across the way, then they'll just open up a Teams chat. I think that's the key thing. If they've got loads of apps open, then the notifications will appear. So having that discussion about when they're in college, they're on Teams, and that they're only on Teams is really important, I think.
And that's a real adult skill as well, isn't it? I mean, I spend a lot of time on Facebook looking at, Teams for Educators groups and things, but I actually don't keep that on my work machine. I go to it occasionally, when I want to particularly catch up with that, but I haven't got it pinging at me all the time. And it's just a really good personal practice.
We have got a webinar coming up later this month, which actually looks at the Senso Cloud offering, which is where you can monitor some of those conversations, just like you could do in the classroom. So if that is of interest to you, we'll post a link for that as well. So I think Lloyd's going to do a demo for us now. So Lloyd, I don't know if you want to go through the different topics that you'll be covering, and then just feel free to go into it.
Yep, thanks, Tony. So yep, just going to talk about what we're going to cover today then in the demo. We've got a quick demo that we can go through. So, we spoke a lot about some of the different types of teams that we've been talking about. So some of the subject areas, the collaboration teams, and also class teams. So I'll talk about how you can actually set those up first of all, and some of the different types of teams you can create. And then we'll just go into a bit of detail of the best practices, how you can use those, more importantly, how they actually connect together for the long term, so it's much easier for teachers and for students. So within the teams as well, so once I go into the demo, I'll talk about some of the conversations and channels, so just standard features within teams for making it easy to be able to communicate with the full group, and then just bringing everything together and showing how those resources within the teams will actually connect to assignments and some of the teaching and learning tools within the class teams areas. So if I go straight into the demo now, so I've gone straight into Microsoft Teams. So we've got quite a couple of different teams in here, from a starting point. So we've got, senior leadership teams, maybe some subject areas as well. So we've got English as well, which I'll go into detail later on. And you will also see there are some class teams as well. So we've got some year 11 English classes. So first of all, just to let you know how you can actually create some teams. So at the top right, you do have the option where you can either join or create a team. And this will just give us a quick overview of the types of teams that we can set up and the differences between them. So the first one we've got is class teams. So this would be for all of your students, because you do get some extra tools within the class teams, such as assignments and also the class notebook, which are really useful. Then you do get some staff teams as well. So these are the templates that we actually use in our builds to create the subject areas. So some of the benefits that you get with these teams, you do get staff notebooks as well. So I'll show you those just after this quick demo, just how you can actually use staff notebooks and why they're really useful for maybe each department or each subject. And you can create just standard teams as well. So if that's different study groups or any teams within, a school that you want to bring together and put in within one area to share and collaborate on files. If I was just to create a staff team, just to show you this quick setup, it's nice and easy to do. You get a quick form where you can fill out, and you can add a name to the team, and then you can even make that public or private group and add people in so they can join the team and access the same files. I'm just going to go back and show you one that I've set up before. So for the first one, I'm actually just going to go over a quick standard music team. So this could be for a department and for all of the music teachers that are working within here. And that would make it really easy so they can use the staff notebook tools and they can actually collaborate on files, or they can use the notebook to work on devices together. So if I just switch this to the list for a second, I'll just go to my music team. So within the staff teams, we do have, the main posts area, just like a standard team. We've got files for the full department as well. And these files will become reusable, so you can actually use them year after year and use them in the class teams as well. And the first thing I'll show you is just the staff notebooks. This might be a little bit different to anyone that's maybe used Teams in the past. So you would get a staff notebook for these type of teams, and this would give you an area where every member of this team would get their own notebook where they can share notes with other teachers within that subject. So you can see here we've got a teacher within here, and they've got maybe a lesson plan feedback area, And what's beneficial about this, you could have maybe head of department, which would be the owner of this team, and they can actually see all of the teachers' sections within here. And you also do have a collaboration space, which would be for all of the teachers, so they can maybe use this if they're in online calls, or if they're in school and they want to create some quick meeting notes. They've got everything in one place, which can be used year after year, so nothing gets lost, and it's much easier to be able to find things over time.
So like this would be the place that you would do your CPDs thing. That's the main idea of that, I suppose, is you could work with folks that they're in your department. So this is a staff notebook. Does that mean it's the staff team type that you need to create to get one of these?
Yep, exactly. So that when we was creating the teams, it would be the staff team that you need to set up, and that's where you get the staff notebook along with that team. And just to mention as well, you do get the content libraries. This would be any pages that you want the staff to be able to see, but they couldn't edit any of these pages. So you can, completely customize this for each subject within there. So now if I go to the files as well, we'll just add some quick documents, then we'll reuse some of the ones that we've actually used in this session in some of the other teams. So I've already got a couple of folders that I've created before, and if I go into lesson plans, for example, you can already see we've got a couple of documents, and it's nice and easy to upload files into here. So if you've got any shared drives or even different teams that you want to move content into these, it's nice and easy to just upload these files, or you can just move them across to any of the other teams that you've set up previously before. And obviously there's always the option to just work on the fly and create new documents and create new folders. And we will link into this later on, so we'll show you some of the teams that we create, some of the subject teams, and just to show you how they actually link into the subject site. So something Jonathan was mentioning about, over time, to make it really easy to find everything and have that repository for the subject and within a SharePoint site. We'll show you how those files actually link up and are organized within the SharePoint sites that we create. For the posts as well, so just talking about conversations and channels and within the team, we can create new conversations in here. So it's really easy to send out messages to the full team if you want to attach a document that everyone's going to work on together as well. So if I was to make this announcement, maybe if this was a staff meeting, you could create a meeting in here, or we could just share some documents that you want to talk about. And then we can add some backgrounds as well and make it stand out within Teams, so you can find messages really easily. This is really good with the students as well. So with any of the class teams, you can add these illustrations or add some background images just to make that stand out so they don't miss anything within the actual team. I'll just mention the full team as well. So this is another best practice of just using the app mentioned. So this would actually send a notification to all of those members. So that way, again, if that's students in a class team, or if it's just all of the teachers in a subject area, they're not going to miss anything that's going on for any of these, important messages or just documents that somebody's working on within that team. So I can post that within there, and then all of the members will get a notification in the activity at the top left. What's quite good about these messages, so something that's a bit different to maybe how you'd have worked before with using emails and sending out documents to each other. Within Teams, you can actually edit messages. So again, that's linking to the best practices, the way you can, it makes it easy if you do make any mistakes, or if you just want to update something or update a message within the team, it's nice and easy to do that. You don't have to, much different to emails where as soon as you've sent that out, you can't make any changes. When in Teams, you can always go back and change any of your messages or the documents in there. So that was just a quick demo of using the conversations. We do have channels as well, so that's where you can actually create multiple channels within a team. So just to give you a quick example, if I was to add a new channel onto this music team, we could maybe call this meetings. Everything could be organized for the meetings in this team. We've then got a fresh conversation area where you can relate all of your conversations to that topic. So again, it's much easier to find in the future, or to to go back and relate to any of the messages that I've sent into the team before. And you would get a separate files area for those meetings as well, so everything's organized to those different channels. So on that topic of just looking at the subject areas, so that was a team that I've just set up really quickly on the fly. But just to show you some of the teams, how I would link into the subject areas that we actually create. So if I was to go into English here, we have all of the files at the top. So again, this would be all of the documents for a full department, all of the staff resources that students wouldn't be able to access. And staff will be able to work together on these files. You've got one version of the truth, so there won't be multiple documents going around within the team. But also we do add an area for the students. So these would be student-facing documents. So the teacher can actually access those files from Teams. So if they're already working in Teams, they can go into one of the year areas or key stage, however it's been set up, and you could actually access all of the files from this view. But just to show you the other side of things and relating it to the SharePoint side, if I was to just go into the intranet that we create and show you how you can actually use those same documents within the subject areas. These are some of the examples of these subject sites that we would spin up within SharePoint. So from here, the students can access all of the different year areas that they would have access to, and also staff can use this to access the same resources. So if I was to go into that area as a teacher, you can see these are actually the same files that we was just looking at within Teams, but this time we can access them via SharePoint, and it gives us a much easier way to be able to organize the content, which is much better in the long term. And if I just go into one of the student areas, so we've got Year 11, for example, this would then show us the same files that we can actually access in Teams. So some of the examples of what these documents would be all of your teaching and learning resources that you can use year on year. So you can store them in one place rather than storing them in every single class team that you would have. So if I was to go into one of the class teams, so this would be a different area now, relating it to the students and what they can access. So if I was to go into this Year 11 English team, and you can see this again, we've got all the conversations areas. So these would be messages with the students, where you can use some praise areas that we've got here for some students doing some good work, maybe some online lessons as well, and also just standard reminders and just any information, communications that you need to have with the students. As you'll see on the left hand side, going back to some of the channels that you would use, you can create those within the class teams as well. So we've got classwork, collaboration, homework tasks. Again, that can be customized to the teacher how they want to set up the class team. But now linking everything together, so how the class teams link to those subject areas that we was just talking about. So you can actually add tabs within Teams as well. So even from this class team, which would be English Year 11, as a teacher or a student, they don't even have to go to a different team. They can actually just go to the tab at the top, and they can access either the staff resources as a teacher, and again we've got all of those same documents we've been looking at today, or as a student they can actually go into one of their year areas and access all of those resources. So that's all organized for them automatically, and they can access the files.
So that's all something that we do as part of our product, specially, isn't it? Like that, we create that separation between teachers and students, and within the same space, students can see some things and teachers can see other things, but never the twain shall meet on those.
Yeah, exactly. But you can add tabs to Teams as well. So if you do have any, subject teams that you may have, you can use the document library and link that into there. But that would only really be for the members of staff for other teams, as there's lots of permissions in SharePoint, and that's part of what we do, is making sure that the students have the access to the right files and the right level of access as well, so they won't change any of those staff resources that they're not meant to see.
Right. So I guess if you were doing this yourself at home, you might be tempted to create, an English subject team, and then obviously invite the teachers in, but you might also think, oh, I'll invite the students as well. So you invite, 1,000 students into that team. That's not a great idea, because those students would then be able to edit all that content, and you might find they accidentally start overwriting your kind of master documents. So I think if you are going to do that kind of thing, it's worth using a system like ours just to keep that stuff separate, so that students are definitely just readers. It's just a textbook to them because they can't write on it, and the students are protected, and the teachers are then the ones that can actually edit all the content.
Can I just provide some context to that point, Darren, if that's okay?
Oh yes, please, Jonathan.
Yeah, so in the early inceptions of Teams, there was the assignments weren't quite up to date. They've made a lot of improvements with assignments, and what teachers were finding is that if they had like a couple of year 10 groups, what they wanted was to put them in one big team, because then they could set all the homework at the same time. Any resources, they only had to share them once. The main reason they were doing that as well was so that when they set the homework, they could mark all the assignments and get an overview of the assignments by just clicking on the assignments tab at the top of the team. Now what Teams has done is it's also updated the assignments tab on the left hand side of Teams, so that you can get that overview, so you don't need to create these massive student teams. The only ones I would suggest is the ones that Cloud Design Box do, which is like an all students team, and that's for SMT and people like that to send central communications out.
Yeah, because I think the best mix is usually to have one teacher, or maybe a teacher and an assistant, and about 30 kids. That's how a classroom works. That kind of feels comfortable. Obviously, with things like lockdown, there's been a requirement that occasionally you might want to have a super team that's got everybody in. But I think you're right. It's knowing the difference between a small class where it's very collaborative, just like a normal classroom, and then those wider spaces where you put your permanent resources, but that's kind of read only to the students, so you can just keep using them year on year. Thanks for that. Actually, Lloyd, on that basis, do you want to show the assignments integration as well?
Yep, I'll move on to that. So yeah, if I go to assignments for this class team, and when we go to the form to set up assignments, I'll just create a new one. So now we want to use all of those resources, so all the files that we've been storing for the subject. So if I was to go to my Ed resources as a teacher, the way we can access those files, if we was to go to Teams, we'll then be able to see a list of all of the teams that we're a member of. So for this view, we've got quite a lot within here, but we can see we've got the English one. So where we're just looking at, where we've got general, which would be staff resources, or all the student files as well. So we could choose from any of those resources that we want to attach to the teams. And I could also going back to the start of the demo where we've got the music team that I've created today. Can find the one within here. There we go. And then some of the documents that I've uploaded. So we've even got the different channel and some of those files that we looked at. So you can link to any of the teams that you're a member of, and you can use those across your assignments.
So you really don't have to keep your resources in the class that you're assigning from. You can put your resources in permanent centralized spaces that students may have access to, or maybe it's just spaces for teachers to keep their kind of master resources in there, and just link across.
Yep, exactly, and that'll really help you out, year on year. So then teachers don't have to move files if any of the class teams have, once they've rolled over into the next year. This system will really help them to be able to just reuse content and make life much easier for them.
I know one of the comments that we hear quite a lot when we're kind of engaging with this process with our customers is, but our teachers will want to take their own copy because they need to customize it for their class. So yeah, they're thinking about differentiation. The idea being they would, have their own version of that centralized resource in their own class team because it's theirs and it's just for that class. But what I would say is, actually you can do differentiation, but you can also do it centrally. So if you're thinking about the resources that you're managing as a head of department for your subject, you can deliberately say, well, we're going to have one document that is kind of core learning, and most students are going to do this. But you can then say, but we've got some gifted students, so we're going to create an additional document for those, or we'll create another version of that document where just the questions are a little bit harder. Or you can go the other way if the students need more support to get them into something. And you could do that kind of differentiation in those centralized places, and it actually works better because you don't have every teacher differentiating. Because in differentiation, even you don't normally create a separate document for each student in your class differently. You normally kind of organize things into groups a little bit and say, well, you know, this is core, this is advanced, these guys need some extra support to get them into it. And you could do it that way. I suppose the worst thing you could do, though, is you could, or not the worst thing you could do, is bring those resources out of the centralized places, bring them into a single class just for a little while to test it out with that class. And if that resource is good, and if you've successfully differentiated those materials, put it back into the pot. That's the important bit. So that in the end, all those documents end up in those centralized places. So they can be reused year on year, and the quality is good, and the head of department can keep an eye on them, and all those things.
Can I just make another chip in on that, because it was quite funny, because I'm in the spirit of multitasking. I'm currently trying to click on all the bolds in my own staff team to try and make sure I'm on top of everything. And I've just sent you an email actually with it just illustrates your point so effectively there. So what Darren's talking about is this old teachers working in isolation, and you have one person delivering the training, you have one person that does the well-being and stuff like that in the college, and they do the training for everyone. I've just sent an image of our staff training team, and we've basically now got teachers that create mini videos completely off their own back, and they share them to the whole staff, and they just do that as and when it becomes relevant. So at the moment we've just got one where a teacher has thought, right, how can we maintain well-being? Well, I've done a quick video on how you can use the immersive reader to actually improve well-being and actually have things read out rather than the student reading all the time because they get that screen fatigue. So it's just a really good way to illustrate what you'd said there, Darren, about teachers no longer work in isolation. They don't edit their own documents. They start to now think about themselves a lot more like a team. I know that sounds corny because it's the name of the platform, but it does sort of work. And I do think this is something that we can't lose when we go back to face-to-face teaching. We can't just go back to the old way of working in isolation. We've got to maximise this. And if anything, it's more important now because of the impact of COVID and the effect on the jobs market that we make sure this is how people work going forwards.
Absolutely. Sharing is caring, right?
Yeah, definitely. You went one more corny than I did.
All right, great. So the last thing I'll just go into show on the teams aspect, and the one team that we haven't talked about yet, but it's a good one to show, is some of the other types. So we've got more of the collaboration team. So talking about maybe a finance team or an admin team as well. So some other types of areas that you can create. So if I was to go into one of the ones that we can demo, so I think we've got this data team in here. There's lots of things going on. So we've got all of these different channels that you can actually access within Teams, again, much like we've looked at across some of the other teams, where we've got meeting notes and all of the conversations thread as well. But then just to show you the SharePoint side, so how that all of those members of the team can actually use this easier in the SharePoint aspect, and using news articles and getting the benefits out of the SharePoint pages. So if I was to go to data team, this will then show me all of the same files, but in a much nicely organized way, and especially for the long term. So we've got links to the different areas and all of the files, and also news articles, so they can share out information and work together on videos or anything that they're going to be working on together to send out information. They can do that using this SharePoint tool. So as we can see, we've got all these different channels. So from the SharePoint side, if I was to go into exams, again, we can access the same files as we could do that within Teams, but also you can have conversations on those files and reuse the same documents if you send in a link to a file, just like you would do before of using attachments, but this time you'll actually use those same documents where you're working together on those files. So I think that just about wraps up the demos, what we had planned. I think we've covered everything that we aim to set out. So any questions at all, Tony, on anything that's come in that we want to recap?
Yeah, we've had some questions. Lloyd, do you want to show our contact details while we go through the questions on the PowerPoint? So you'll see on the screen in a minute, we've got our contact details. If you do have a mobile phone, you can just turn your camera on, point at one of those QR codes, and it should send you straight to either our Twitter handle, our newsletter sign-up form, so lots of tips and guides that we send out to people each month. Our YouTube channel, again, lots of free training videos on there, podcasts and guides, and our Facebook group as well, which is a Facebook group for educators where they can share ideas. And then our contact details on the screen as well. So yeah, we've had a few questions. One that's just come in recently, which is a question for you, Jonathan. Is Microsoft Teams stable in your college? Does this all place additional load on your school network? We find Microsoft Teams is sometimes unstable.
It's sort of in context, that one. So obviously this has brought out quite a lot of structural deficiencies that people maybe have in their institutions with regards the actual line into the school or college, how much broadband you have, and also is your network stable. So when you are constantly using a video, for example, you need a stable network. It can't drop out and drop in, which is less visible when you send things like emails, because even if it's out, it will send the email when it reconnects. So Teams, I think you need to make a distinction between sending constant videos out and Teams. Teams on its own is a really stable app from what I've found, and there is a difference between using the app and the web interface. Some people prefer the web, some people prefer the app, but I would say that whatever works for you, definitely stick with it. I think find out the cause of the problem if there is an insufficiency, and deal with it, because you don't want to sort of say, oh well, we're not going to use that platform because of like the Wi-Fi, for example. What you want to do is you want to fix the Wi-Fi so that the platform works. Hopefully that answers that question. I know that's a simplistic response, but I don't really know the context of to why it might be unstable. We haven't found it's unstable, and in our instance, we've found we've actually increased. It hasn't arrived yet, but our line into the college, we've now gone from the 1 gig broadband that we've now increased to 10 gig, something like that. We've basically paid for 10 times more speed, just so that we can, going forward, this is going to work for the next decade and beyond.
I guess, Jonathan, you have the benefit of being in Hull, which has a really good internet connection and really high speeds.
Yeah, I do work as a DfE demonstrator. I do work with a lot of coastal communities. I'm not going to name them for GDPR, but I do work with a lot of coastal schools and small primaries. And I think the issue is always the same. Sometimes you have to invest to actually see a benefit, rather than those problems that constantly dog you, that the internet's just slow in this school. I think if you can invest, and the good thing that's coming on the horizon is obviously 5G, which for coastal and individual institutions, I think is going to be massive. But I do think it's as important as paper now. So sometimes you've just got to spend a little bit more money and get a better connection, because often, even if you're in rural, there will be the option to upgrade if you're going to spend the money.
I guess this isn't just about Teams either, Jonathan. You know, if you're just using YouTube or Vimeo or TeacherTube and watching videos online as part of your lessons, you're going to have similar sort of issues. Obviously, Teams takes it to another level because you've now got, two-way video communication. But it's worth making this investment in the internet and networks, just because that's the future, really.
Yeah, the way I see it as well, we deal with a lot of disadvantaged students. So if our Wi-Fi wasn't good enough, they're going to use their own data, so that when they get home, they might have very limited data, or at the end of the month they might have no way to actually contact people. So we actually see it as a responsibility to provide them with internet, because what you will find is students will mask poor internet by going to their own data if your Wi-Fi is not good enough. And I don't think as the way that the country needs to move forward that is acceptable. I think that when they're in school, it needs to be paid for by the taxpayer. So we need to look at what we need to invest in the future. And it does, in the long run, it will save you money. We've got rid of 2 photocopiers, which we spend about £20,000 a year servicing our photocopiers. But now, and it's better for the environment, it's better for student digital skills, to actually say, well, why don't we put that money into invest in better broadband? So actually, we don't need to do the paper, because we can do the assignments and live marking, digital inking through OneNote that Lloyd's just explained. So yeah, definitely invest to see the benefits in the long run.
That's really interesting, because I know it's quite difficult sometimes to take a step back and see where the savings are going to be if you do invest in that digital infrastructure. It can be as simple as, the extremely expensive photocopiers, or paper that you use in the school. So we've got a few more questions. Do you include governors and other external collaborators in your teams? So I guess from our perspective, I know a lot of schools create accounts for their governors, and they do have them in some lockdown teams. What's your experience with that, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, well, you'll be able to see, because you're owners of our team. We have our governors in. We have all of our stakeholders in. So parents have got to be in your team's environment in some way. I mean, a lot of them are in by default at the moment, because you can see them walking past the camera if your students share video and stuff like that, and sometimes they'll chip in answers to lessons, which is brilliant. It's not wanted, but yeah, it's at least it's better than no engagement. It's vital to be able to make sure this is sustainable. You need your governors in, because just by the very nature, they are more experienced, less probably, they're not digital natives, they're going to need a little bit more training, but it really does enable you as an institution to think about, right, what are we using Teams for, what are we using SharePoint for, and then your governors have an oversight about how as someone new to the technology is going to see maybe barriers to that, and that then gives you insights into things like, well, how does someone who's visually impaired, I'm not saying that all governors are blind, but how does someone who has less accessibility or isn't as good as using technology, what issues do they face? And then that then circles back to, can we actually improve the accessibility? So one thing I would say to people, definitely research what inclusive design is, and how can you bring that to make sure that you're using digital to improve your platform for everyone. And because you improve it for everyone, students with SEND feel more part of a whole. They don't feel that they're getting something different because of them having SEND. And that's not really the way we should be moving in society. It should be that everyone's included, and that everything has subtitles, everything is able to use the immersive reader, because you'll find able-bodied people will use it just as much as people who are disabled and things like that. And that then enables this idea of inclusivity, and yeah, it's the way we should be going as a society.
Great. Just one last question. I think this is aimed at us. So about the synchronization between the school MIS and Microsoft Teams, how often does that happen? So normally we would set that up to synchronize overnight. However, you can schedule it on a more regular basis if you need to. You could run it manually if you need to. And that way, if students move up or down groups or sets, if you get new students or teachers join, then they should be automatically added into those teams within 24 hours. So I think that's all of the questions. We've got one more question that's just come in. Do you automatically see all the SharePoint team sites you have access to within the Teams tab? So the SharePoint sites that Lloyd showed in the menu, that's going to be personalized for you. You can only see the sites that you have access to, so you won't see other sites there. So for a typical person, they might not have as many sites as you see in a demo, because you're not going to be a member of all of those teams. You might be a member of a few collaboration teams. You might teach, 8 or 9 different classes. So your list of teams is going to be much shorter than on the demonstration that Lloyd did today. So it shouldn't seem too overwhelming for staff seeing the list of teams that they are a member of. So we're just coming up to the hour mark, so we're going to end it there. Thank you very much for joining us, Jonathan.
You're most welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, Lloyd and Darren for presenting and talking through those slides. I hope it's been really useful for everybody who's watched. And we'll be sending out a recording and some more information later today.